What matters to us a lot as humans is our sense of independence, our sense of control. And as we get older, we may begin to lose that sense of control, or at least lose a certain amount of it. So in the whole social care, healthcare, home health industry, where people are helping often older people, the sense of control and independence is central to these people that they're trying to help. But in the traditional industry or mindset or way these sectors are managed, this sense of control is often ignored or taken away. And in fact, most traditional organizations in the industry, they don't really focus on the older person. Instead, they focus on this person here who's delivering the service or the actual product, whether that person is a nurse or a home care worker. So I remember seeing a documentary on home care in the Netherlands, in Holland, some years ago. And everything had become so absolutely managed and measured that as the person was bending down to tie the laces of this older person, she said, "And now I am delivering product 67. Because everything had been segmented and measured. Everything said, oh, you need to be able to tie a shoelace within 30 seconds. You need to be able to change a bandage within. Everything had been measured about what this nurse was actually doing. And in that process, they had lost the whole essence of why they were doing it or what the overall purpose was. And the home help industry in the Netherlands, as in many other countries, was in a crisis. Costs were going up and satisfaction was declining year on year, and they couldn't figure out what to do about it. Until an organization came along that has radically changed the whole model of how home care and home help is delivered. First in the Netherlands, and now it is a model that has been taken up around the world. And this organization is called Buurtzorg. And what they decided was to do something very radical, certainly in the context of how traditional organizations are structured. Instead of putting the organization at the center, they put the person at the center. And they said, what matters most to them? Well, what matters most to them is their independence. They don't want somebody else tying the laces for them if they can avoid it. They want as much independence as possible and as much control as possible. And they said, okay, so that's what these people want. Well, that's what we're going to measure. We're no longer going to measure the people who deliver the service, the nurses themselves, based on what they are doing. We will measure them based on the independence of the people they are seeking to help. So the core objective or the core metric had become, how can you help people live independently? That is your job as a nurse. So that totally changed the scope of the actual job. And what the nurses started doing was creating these networks around the actual person. So the person is at the center, the customer is at the center, and the first network that they created was the informal networks. And this is their neighbors, their children, people in the community that might be able to actually support them. Now, historically, nobody ever did that because they didn't have time. They had 37 minutes to visit the person. They had, I don't change the bandage because I'm too senior to change the bandage. We'll have somebody junior. Everything was segmented up into minutes and seconds. But the new metrics was, how do we help them live independently? So they created or helped create an informal network. Then the Buurtzorg team, the nurses themselves, And then the formal network, which would be the hospitals. So this is the last resort. So the objective is, how do we keep people out of hospital? How do we keep people living independently in the process? This organization started off in 2008 with 4 nurses. Now it has 14,000 nurses in the Netherlands, which is a population of about 12, 15 million people. And they have no managers. There are no managers in Buurtzorg. The Buurtzorg central team has only 50 people at head office. They create these 10 to 14 person groups of nurses who work independently to solve these problems and who are not managed. And the core overall metric is independent living. So you think, well, that's not going to work. That sort of model cannot be successful. That cannot deliver value or deliver revenue. Well, that model has the highest patient satisfaction in the Netherlands, the highest employee satisfaction, and the lowest costs. They're the most profitable nursing home care organization by far in the Netherlands. They cure patients faster than their peers do. Because what happens now if somebody's laces is untied for a second or third time, they don't look at and say, oh, and now I'm going to tie your laces. They ask, well, maybe we should go and see the eye specialist, or maybe we should take you to some yoga classes. They think about the issues that are behind that. So they have much less people falling downstairs, breaking their hips, because they're actually addressing the person in a holistic way with the core objective of how do we help you be successful living independently. And this is the core change on a global basis in new organizational thinking. That instead of managing what we do as designers or content creators, we manage what the customer is obsessed with, what the person wants most. We find out what is most important to them, and we measure and focus on that. And in that sort of model, we can transform things and create very successful businesses. The golden rule in Buurtzorg, they don't have a research department. They don't do patient research because every nurse is spending 60% of their week with their patients. So they don't talk about research because they know their patients, because they're with them every day in the process. And the golden rule of a lot of these successful organizations is more and more orientation of designing with, being with the people who actually use the product. So if we were to take this into a digital realm and look at organizations that have this similar type of thinking and similar type of model, then Google is one of those organizations. From the very beginning, their overall principle was focus on the user and all else will follow. So if you focus on the user, you don't focus on search. You don't talk about that you have a search engine. You're not interested in the search results, so to speak, that you deliver. What you're interested in, if you're focusing on the user, is you're focusing on the answer. And you're focusing on how am I able to get the answer to the person as fast, as quickly as possible. So 10 years ago, or 5 or 10 years ago, if you were searching for Dublin weather, and it's always the same, it's always raining anyway, so, but let's say you were an optimist and you were searching for Dublin weather. You'd be happy enough, you'd get the first search result or the second search result, you'd click on that, and hopefully it would say 16 degree and raining, or so you get the answer after you got to that page. Now that took about 20 seconds. To put in your search term, to choose the result, to click on it, and to read the actual answer. But about 3 or 4 years ago, maybe 5 years ago, the answer comes onto the page, because you're not looking for search results. You know, we get so caught up in the mechanics of the activities that we're actually doing. People are not saying, oh, I can't wait to see another 10 search results. You know, they're looking for the weather in the process. So Google is not managing the search results page, it's managing the answers. It's managing getting you the answers as quickly as possible. So new advances in HTML come out, and Google says, how can this help us get answers more quickly to people? Right? Because that's what their metric is. How do we get you the answer as quickly as possible? If they were a traditional ad-driven company, they'd put the answer on the second page of search results. Yeah, and that would double the amount of clicks. Yeah, that would be traditional thinking in the process. So then that's down to about 9 seconds in the process. But you know, now you go into Chrome or whatever, and you don't even have to type the full text. It tells you straight away, oh, it's 16 degrees. And if you were a traditional organization, you'd say, what a stupid thing to do. Because now we're not even bringing them to the page where we make the money off them. So why does Google do this? Because it knows that if it doesn't be the answer for all your questions, it's opening up opportunities for competitors to come into the actual space. And while it may lose some money, so to speak, by not selling to you here, it stays as the #1 place you go to get the answer. So it's measuring success based on your success, first and foremost. And if you set that as a foundation, measuring the success of the customer based on the most important things that the customer wants to do, you can make a lot of money. You can deliver a lot of value as well. This is the Google website at the very beginning in 1999. It is one of the very few pages that has ever existed on the web that has got simpler over time, right? This is in 2001, 2003, 2005, 2007. I mean, think about it. I mean, what is the person doing who runs that page? Such a lazy git. Can't they come up with some ideas to do a bloody redesign and do something interesting? That person is going to get fired, you know, unless they do something really interesting with that home page. Because it's staying the same. You know, where's the innovation? Where is the creativity of the people in that environment? 2009, look, they did something stupid. They made the search box bigger. I mean, come off it. Why would they want to do that? I mean, surely they can do something more than that, right? Here, right? What you notice there? Advanced search, it disappears, right? Because you know what they discovered? People never use advanced search because they say, it's advanced. I'm just an ordinary person. I'd never use advanced search. I wouldn't be able to do it, right? What they did was they brought the advancedness into the search. They didn't send you to a place where you did advanced search. Instead, they interpreted, oh, looks like you're looking for a geographic place. I'll put a map on the page when you search for Dublin, or I'll put the weather on the page, instead of sending you to a place where you have to do advanced things. It does the advanced things for you rather than asking you to do the advanced things. Right? It gets simpler over time, one of the very rare pages. This is Google if it was run by most organizations, right? Meet Sergey and Bryn. Yeah, hi guys. You know, the founders, senior management speeches and activities, we really want that, right? You know, and it's Google News, Google Primes, Google Launches, Google oh, those Google people, they're working so hard. For us, somebody send them a Kit Kat and say, have a break. Yeah. A new improved search, Google is delighted to announce the launch of. Aren't we so interested in what mood Google is in? Oh, it would be terrible if Google was depressed. We want Google to be delighted. How happy are we when they're delighted? And new improved search, it's now even easier. If you ever have to talk about simplicity, you are living in a world of complexity. Right? Because if it's easy, you just do it. If you have to talk about simplicity, you've got a problem. Right? If you have to write content that says it's simple, quite obviously it's not, because if it was simple, I could just click on the button. I wouldn't have to get an explanation that it was actually simple. Welcome to our website. We'd have a big advanced search, and of course, we'd have a huge, big banner ad on the home page. Look at how much more money they could have if they were doing that. That's the way traditional organizations think. And maybe we'd put a basic search on the page as well, just in case anybody actually needed it. This is the old model of thinking, and this is the pressures to actually all these units, the PR department, the marketing department, constantly pressing to get their needs front and center rather than the customer needs front and center. This is Google if it wanted to get found in search when it started off. How would you create a page if you wanted to get found in Google? Imagine Google wanted to get found in Google. What sort of a page would it create? Well, if you listened to the SEO industry, the search engine optimization industry, here's the type of page that you'd actually create. Google, you'd mention the word search loads of times. Google Internet search engine. You'd keep repeating those words. Search the internet. You'd have top searches, most popular links, recent searches, etc. You'd fill the page with crap in order to get found and piss people off. Right. You'd say, come to our website, which is full of crap. The crap brings you to the website, and the crap sends you away. Right? And we do all this, why? Google didn't do it. The top sites don't do it. They're actually useful. The best search engine optimization is to actually be useful. Do something that is actually useful in the process. So be very careful about these old traditional strategies. And a key thing, how do Google maintain this? The culture, I remember a friend of mine used to be a senior designer in the search in Google. Every month they bring the developers out to actually be with people and watch people and see them actually using the actual product in the process. But it has been difficult to maintain that degree of simplicity. But simplicity can drive revenue. Amazon is another example of a customer-obsessed organization that puts the customer at the center. The most important thing, focused obsessively on the customer. And what is an example of obsession? And is constant iteration. Amazon changes its environment an average of every 12 seconds. So something is changing on the Amazon website every 12 seconds. They are constantly testing and iterating and focusing on what people are doing. So agility and agile, as some criticisms about it, but agility is more the focus rather than agile. The ability to respond to customer behavior. Customers are moving faster today than most organizations are. Customers are changing at a greater speed than most organizations are. And the really advanced organizations are keeping up with their customers by constantly iterating and tweaking and changing based on the responses from their customers. So the older organizations, the older models of thinking, and we live in parallel worlds, in twin universes today. two different movements throughout the world. One of them, the old model, it's still strong, based on the organization at the center, ego, rigidity, and complexity often in the processes. And we have this atmosphere, so to speak, of trust. We trust these great leaders, or some of us do, in this old model of organization. But this model is being challenged a lot, particularly by younger generations, particularly by net-savvy generations. This is a study of 30,000 young people that was done in 2012 and 2017. And they asked people basic questions. This is all around the world. How happy were you? 77% said they were pretty happy with their lives. 42% at that stage said they trusted religious leaders. 27% said they trusted politicians. That was in 2012. Relatively low figures for politicians and trust in religious leaders. This is 2017. Right, 2% trusting politicians, 9% trusting religious leaders. There has been a collapse of trust on a global basis in multiple countries, right? In traditional organizational models, trust has not disappeared. Trust has shifted, because if trust had disappeared, why do we trust strangers? Because strangers are usually at the very end point of any sort of trust equation. Because why do we get into Uber, and why do we stay in strangers' houses or let strangers into our houses in the first place? Trust has not disappeared. It has shifted into a different model. Why do these models actually work? Do they work because we trust Uber management? Right? Do they work because we trust Airbnb management? Right. They work because we trust the people who use these things. Trust has moved to use. We trust those who use the actual thing in the process. So there's a shift in the model of many societies, away from looking towards a brand or a leader to looking towards the actual use of the actual environment. So here we get in this person's car because other people like us have got in this person's car before. And they are rated in numerous different ways in the process. So there's been a shift in how many people in society make decisions, shifting away from a model of blind trust towards a model of actual use. That we want to see, if we're thinking of visiting Dublin, and we've two friends, and one of them has been to Dublin and the other hasn't, who are we going to listen to more? The person who has been there, the person who has been in the actual environment. So there's a shift away from blind trust towards use of the actual environment. And I'm going to look at the components now over the next while of this new environment. As I said, it's like there's two worlds operating together. The old world is still operating, but a new world is emerging as well. A new way of actually behaving and organizing and creating new types of organization. And this has a model around humility, agility, and simplicity in the process. These are the key characteristics of these new organizations and societal structures that are emerging. So let's look at humility. Humility is not weakness, right? Humility is the ability to accept that you don't know all the answers, and that we need to actually work and collaborate with other people in order to achieve success in a process. Here, this was a study that was done about people working, service workers, or people working in actual hotels and hotels areas. And what they found, they had these participants that would actually work at a reception for a period and then later be judged by this panel of people who they interacted with based on their friendliness. And what was actually found was that the white lady was judged as being friendly for not particularly smiling, having a neutral face, but the black lady was not seen as friendly by behaving in the exact same way as the white lady was. To actually get the rating of equality, this lady had to smile far more in the process, right? She had to make far greater effort to get the same ratings of friendliness as the white person had to do. And these sorts of inherent prejudices that exist within our society, we're not even aware of. The people in many areas outside of our perspective. And this is a key problem often with empathy, that we often have empathy for people who are like us, and we don't even consider the people who are outside of our peer-based actual circles in the process. So the humility of saying that we are not our customers, and our perspectives are not the perspective of everybody else, and that we need to actually take in evidence that there are many other worldviews than the worldview that we actually have, is a major characteristic of successful professionals today. This is particularly true within science. Within science, you cannot be successful on your own. Right? You cannot achieve anything of value today in the scientific world as an independent scientist. This is the Higgs boson. Right. And in 2015 or so, there was a major new paper, a breakthrough on this very important particle. How many do you think scientists were involved in creating this paper in 2015 on the Higgs boson? 93? Any other guesses? Any higher, lower? Lower? Higher? 5,000. 5,154 people scientists were actually involved in this process. This is one of the great scientists of the last 50 years or so, Daniel Dennett. He said the paper's coming out of CERN. This was a paper that came out of CERN with 5,000 people. The web was invented in CERN, in Switzerland as well. The paper's coming out of CERN with 500 authors. No one author understands the whole paper. More and more, the unit of comprehension is going to be the group. Right. In science, if you become a doctor, to become a doctor, you have to go deeper and deeper for your doctor to specialize. But by the time you get your doctorate, you can't achieve anything because you've gone so deep into the complex world. To actually do decent research, you have to come upwards and cooperate and collaborate with often hundreds of other people. So to actually, as the world becomes more complicated, you cannot achieve anything on your own or in your own peer group either. These 5,000 people, they're not all physicists. They are finding that if they bring in philosophers, if they bring in biologists, they are getting better research coming out of the scientific world. This is the model of scientific paper publishing over a 100-year period. And you see, for essentially 80 of those 100 years, 80 or 90, it was about an average of a scientific paper was one person, one scientist, 1.2, 1.3 people. And then something happened around the 80s, the early 90s, and it began to explode the quantity of people involved in creating scientific papers. What happened? The web. The web gave us a technology of cooperation. The web is a network. The web is a connective environment that brings people actually together. And science used that new network to actually collaborate far more. And as a result of that, the human genome, which they were predicting would take 50 years to actually decode, was decoded in 5 years in the process, because they were able to share the task out among thousands of institutes and bring those findings together in a collaborative basis. Other studies have found that it's multi-country collaborative science is delivering higher productivity. So the idea of that just Swiss scientists will come up with the best solution is proving not to be the case. That if we bring together different cultures, people from different cultures and perspectives, it's not a nice thing to do, it's a clever thing to do. We will get better solutions coming out of this environment. But this requires a humility to say, I don't know everything, my group doesn't know everything, my country doesn't know everything, that the more we collaborate across cultures, across environments, the better the science becomes. Another study found of some 19 million or 18 million papers that multidisciplinary groups were delivering better science and more innovation. So bringing together not just 5,000 physicists in CERN, but bringing together a whole array of different perspectives. If you want to really succeed in the future of this world, you need to be creating networks that are beyond your peer groups, beyond your disciplines, and creating and working with people with very different perspectives and very different skill sets. These will deliver better results and better products coming forward. I've worked a lot with the European Union over the years, very complex organization that has achieved many, many great things despite what some countries might say or think. But it's a complicated organization. And we did a big project to identify what did people really want from the European Union. And we found big issues around climate change or innovation or funding or education and training. These were the things that people wanted in the countries of the European Union. And then we went to all the departments. There's some 40 big units within the European Union. And we asked them, well, do you have something to do with climate change? Do you have something to do with law? And we asked them all that question. And what we discovered that there was 77 tasks that citizens and businesses wanted to do. And every single one of those was shared by at least one other DG. And on average, there was 12 departments or director generals per task. So what did that mean? It meant that if you were interested in European law, well, some of the law would be in this one, some of the law here, some of the law would be here, and in 9 or 15 other different places. So it was very difficult to know where to actually go to get the law. Now, the units, the silos have great beneficial roles in order to do many, many activities. But the digital designers, their challenges were not to get rid of these units, but to rather bridge and to bring law together into a type of seamless environment, so that the person, the customer, the citizen, the business didn't need to actually have to understand, oh, this part of law is over in this Director General. Instead, the designers were trying to create these bridges between the silos. And often, good design today is a bridge building exercise within the organization, because often the worst problems that customers have in customer experience is in the transition between two elements of the organization. These are where often most of the pain points of customers' experience occurs. And we are seeking to bridge build in this environment. Microsoft, historically, was a classical organization in the old model of thinking. And they were very, very internally competitive, and they did very little cooperation within their actual organization, and they were very, very silo-based. And to change this model, they changed the metric of how Microsoft people are being measured. So it used to be all about what you produce, all about what you create. Your career is going to progress if you launch a new feature, if you create a new subsite, etc. The metrics have changed, as they must change if we're to be successful. Now, today in Microsoft, 1/3 of your review is based on what you create. It used to be 100%. What did you actually do? What did you actually create? Today, it's only 1/3 is based on what you create. Another third is on what you share. So the stuff that you create, how has it been used? How have other people used it? Either other Microsoft staff or customers who have actually used it. So how has it been found and how has it been shared in the process? And the other third of your review is what you use. So how have you used other things that have been created rather than in reinventing them yourself? What have you used that other Microsoft people have actually created in the process? So they're shifting the culture away from just being a production and you are rewarded based on what you produce to being rewarded based on what you create, what you share, and what you use. And these new models of management are beginning to emerge slowly but surely in many organizations throughout the world. Jared Spool, one of the great pioneers of this space, has constantly talked about exposure hours, getting out there with your customers, spending time with your customers. 2 hours, as he talked, with customers every 6 weeks as a minimum foundation to actual success. So designing with customers, getting out there in the process. Slack, we begged and cajoled our friends at other companies to give us feedback in the process. This sense of, we are not the masters, we do not know everything, let's get out there and understand. Often, how the product begins, the concept that we have, this sense of humility that is required, is not the concept that ends up being successful. Right. Toad was an e-commerce app for the iPhone that wasn't very successful. But the founders were obsessive about figuring out and working with their customers. They only had about 1,000 or 2,000 customers. But they spent ages with them trying to understand, is there anything useful about this thing at all? Right? It wasn't working very well, but they found that there was one interesting thing that the people were using it a lot for, and that was creating little mini catalogs of clothes and designs and shoes and sharing them with other people. So they said, that's interesting, and they turned it into Pinterest. Right? So often the idea that you have through use becomes something different, and you need that sense of humility to actually listen. Humility is not weakness. Right? Humility is the ability to actually leave your own ego and not think, I know everything, I am the user, I have all the experience here. Glitch was a similar multiplayer game that was not very successful, even though they invested huge amount of money and time into it. But as they were developing it, they came up with an interesting tool to actually collaborate in the development. And they said, oh, that looks interesting, and they created Slack out of it. Right. And there are hundreds more of these stories. Snow Devil was a snowboarding site that was so successful, but they found they had a nice little e-commerce engine and they turned it into Shopify. Right? That ability to design through use, to adapt, to constantly iterate, to continuously improve based on the use of environment, rather than us saying, we are going to create the design, we are going to create the product or the service. YouTube started out as a video dating website in the process. Many of the things on the web began as very different things than what they became. And what they became was something through actual use in the environment. So these are the myths that we are told, the marketing myths that, Steve Jobs went on top of the mountain and did yoga, and then out popped the iPod. In the pro. I mean, that's the lies that we are told by marketing, etc., in the process. Apple was always by far the most obsessively customer research-driven organization of all the technology companies. Right? We just believed the lie that, it was all this special stuff and all this amazing stuff. Apple would sometimes iterate or review 50 different refinements of a single hardware button to get the right thing, constantly iterating, constantly refining, constantly doing market research and observation and designing through use in the environment. This is the world we live in, or most organizations behave, instead of a sense of humility, a sense of organizational arrogance. You go to most websites today, this is what you see. What the org wants the customer to do. What the org wants the customer to do. What the org wants the customer to do. And up at the top is what the customer wants to do. That tiny little sliver at the top that says products and maybe has a search box in it as well. That's what people want to do, and this is what we want people to actually do. That model isn't as successful anymore. And yet we keep repeating it because this is what we've done for 50 years or 70 years. There is another model, and it works by putting people's need front and center in the process. So agility, the ability to adapt. Agility is measured based on your response to your customers. So your ability to respond to your customers is how you measure agility in a particular environment. Feedback is crucial in any sort of agile environment. It's hard to give feedback to the person who created this stone. This is ancient Irish writing. There's no point in saying you misspelt that word, right? Because, it took them 6 months to create it. So you're not going, feedback doesn't work in very slow sort of environments or very rigid sort of environments. But look what happened when the printing press came along. The cost of a book decreased 341 times. So the cost of actually creating the thing massively reduced. Two things happened with print. The cost massively collapsed, and the time massively collapsed to actually create a copy. So those two things happened with print. So what then happened in the world? What did that cause? Those two things, what did they cause? Well, one of the things they caused was a revolution in mapping, right? Between 1570 and 1598, there was at least 28 editions of this atlas. And mapping advanced more in these 28 years than it had advanced in the previous 500 years. Because the publisher, this was a Dutch publisher, was able to create the first copy, then send it out, an exact copy, and get feedback. And got constant feedback such as, Ireland should be bigger, right? You miss Ireland's not as small an island, etc. That sort of feedback, and iterate that feedback, and mapping, and constantly bringing out additions because the technology allowed them to iterate much more quickly. And you jump ahead to today, and Google Maps changes 10,000 times a day. So you give feedback to Google Maps and say you missed this roundabout. They will triangulate that with other data, and if that's correct, that roundabout was missed, they could have that roundabout painted in within 20 minutes. That's the measure of the agile organization. It's the organization's capacity to respond to the behavior or the feedback of the customers. Right. These are the successful organizations. And we see here the constant iteration that's occurring in the process. And if you notice there as well, it's not just about adding to the environment, it's about removing from the environment the stuff that's not working as well in the process. So constantly evolving. And this here, was something Google tried a couple of years ago where they said, Todd, this is a good idea. Let's help people get fitter and as they're walking. So it says it's a 19-minute walk to Stanford Avenue, and the walk burns around 82 calories. That's almost one mini cupcake. So they thought, isn't that nice? That was a cool. Yeah, 10 white dudes in Silicon Valley came up with that idea, right, in the process. But they thought, hey, that's we get people more healthy. So here, they immediately started getting feedback for it in the process. Oh my God, and if you click walking directions, it auto tells you how much food you'll burn off. Right, okay, So to recap, right, the feedback, there's no way to turn it off, it's dangerous, feels shamey, average, calories count as wildly inaccurate, not all calories are equal, a cupcake is not a useful metric, Pink cupcakes are not neutral. See, this is the thing. We create these things all the time, thinking often that we're doing a good thing, but we think it's our experience is everybody's experience, and it's not, And we need that humility and sense of feedback to be able to take in that there are other very different views of the world. In many, many countries of the world, nobody has a bloody clue what a cupcake is. It's a Western type of idea, these sort of things. So these are things that we need this constant feedback in order to actually create better and more refined products. So it took 1 hour to document these flaws. And it took 3 hours to shut the feature down. It took 3 hours. So they had created this feature and it was taken down within 3 hours. How would that occur within your organization? If you went to senior manager and says, that feature we just launched, we're going to take it down. What? Yeah, people are really annoyed with it, right? We've had hundreds of people complaining. You're not taking it down. We've only dug a little hole for ourselves. The hole has to be much bigger before we're going to take it down. I mean, it has to piss at least 10,000 people off. Right? It has to stay up for at least 6 months. Look at how much money we spent on it. And I love cupcakes. Yeah. That's how most organizations behave. The really successful organizations are willing to learn from their mistakes and to make the changes based on the behavior of their actual customers. So agility is the measure of your ability to respond to your customers' behavior. Right. Gov.uk, one of the great pioneering organizations in government around the world. But even they have huge challenges. It takes 17 steps to remove content. 17 steps. You'd give up at step 15. Oh, leave it up. It's not worth it. You'd have climbed Mount Everest before you'd have removed a bloody page. Right? How can these systems work when we build systems to produce and to create, but we never create proper mechanisms to review and remove? If the web was a digestive system, it would have no capacity to poop. That's a painful environment for most websites. Right? And that's what happens. It just gets bigger and bigger and bigger. Even one of the most progressive governments, organizations in the world, their content explodes because their capacity to review and remove is far too complicated. So I want you to imagine that you're in a hotel, you arrived at a hotel, and you're checking in, and there's a basket of fruit on the desk. Sometimes, that you can take a banana or an apple. It's a nice little touch, a welcome. So I want you to now imagine it's 2 or 3 months later, it's dark, you're driving, it's winter time, it's raining, you arrive at this hotel, it's in the middle of nowhere, it's the only hotel for 15 or 20 miles around. And you walk in, right, and there's this horrendous smell as you walk in the door. And somehow you struggle up to the reception desk, and the smell is getting worse. And the person behind the reception desk, she's wearing a gas mask. Right, in the process. So you begin to get a bit dizzy, you put your elbows down the desk, and slowly your eyes are dragged to the bottom of the desk where there's this huge bowl of rotting, stinking fruit. In fact, an ooze has oozed out of the bowl and has slid down the desk, and now it's sticking to the elbow of your jacket. And at this stage you're feeling absolutely nauseous, and you begin to to vomit and faint at the same, and fall back at the same time. You're multitasking in the process as you're falling backwards. And as you're falling backwards, all these thoughts are going backwards in your mind. You're saying, why would they do something like this? Why would they leave a stinking bowl of fruit on the desk? It must be there for months and months. And just before you hit the ground, that moment before you hit the ground, you think about your website. Imagine if content smelled. If you come in the morning, you open up your computer, oh, jeez, God, I better delete those pages, right? Digital is such a dark, empty space. We never get the feedback that we need. We don't get near enough feedback. Many of the more progressive organizations, they're looking at ways to how do we create a feedback environment that brings feedback into the organization so that the organization can feel and somehow experience what is happening to the customer in the digital space. This is called Simon in Toyota headquarters. It's an orb type thing. And Simon is hooked up to the metrics of the website, particularly the page load speeds of the website. So whenever there's about 26 or 27 websites hooked up to Simon. So whenever the load speeds go below a certain threshold, right, Simon begins to glow and change color. And if the speeds are at 5 seconds or 6 seconds or 8 seconds, Simon begins to go red in the process. And this has dramatically changed how Toyota people think about customer experience and speed. People are now often ringing up managers saying, oh, Simon's going red. What are we going to do about Simon in the process? 2 or 3, before Simon came along, nobody really cared about page speed. But now that Simon is here, lots and lots of people in Toyota are concerned about Simon going red in the process. So often finding ways and techniques to bring the experience of the customer in digital, in some sort of a physical artifact, is a very important strategy. This is Fidelity Insurance. They place loads and loads of these big screens all around their organization with metrics of task completion rates, etc. So that they're at the water coolers and the coffee stands and the kitchens and the corridors, and they put little desks and chairs beside them so people can talk about these sorts of metrics. So finding ways to actually bring that experience outwards throughout the organization is a really important strategy. To externalize and create some sort of physical representations or artifacts of the customer experience. So this here, people can sit down and discuss, oh, why is the task completion rate going down on this specific task? So finally, simplicity. Driving the value of simplicity. When I grew up, we used to all watch this show in Ireland on a Friday night. It was called The Late Late Show, and this was Gabe Byrne. Everybody watched the show. And there was one show that I always remembered, and at the beginning of the show, he had all these cartons of milk, 20 cartons of milk, and he said, we're going to have a competition, and whoever wins this competition is going to win a car. It was a huge actual prize, and the competition is whoever can open the milk without spilling it. Whoever can open the carton of milk, because in Ireland, that's it, everybody was complaining. How do you open the milk? You could never open the cartons of milk without spilling the milk. And 20 people came up to open the 20 cartons. Not a single person could open the milk without spilling it. So I thought, why is that? Why would a company create cartons that are impossible to open? And years later, I worked with the company that created these cartons, Tetra Pak. And I couldn't wait to find an engineer, and I said, you remember I saw this problem, and they couldn't open the carton of milk. Why did you do that? Surely you knew that was a problem. He says, yeah, we knew it was a problem. So why did you do it? He says, operational efficiency. Our objective as engineers was, how do we get as many cartons into the box and as many boxes on the pallet as possible so that it's the most efficient and cost-effective way of creating an actual carton? That was our objective: operational efficiency, cost reduction in the process. The idea that the customer, would have problems opening the milk, we didn't care. But they care today, right? They care today. There's a screw cap, etc. Cartons are very easy to open today. And why do they have to care today when they didn't care 15 years ago? Because customers have changed. Right? You go back 15 or 20 years ago and you'd say, I must be stupid, I can't open the milk. I'm sorry, I'm so stupid, I can't open the milk. Right? The customer today says, you must be stupid, right? You've given me a stupid carton that I can't open, right? That's a big shift in customer mentalities, away from I must be stupid to you must be stupid in the process. So we are dealing with customers who have higher and higher opinions of themselves and often lower and lower opinions of organizations. So there's been a big shift in psychology of customers and acceptance of poor service or other sorts of things. So that's one of the reasons we have to change. But we look at complexity, Airbnb in 2015, how it works. The bed, is it? How do you get into a bed? I mean, what? You're hiring a room, and what do you need, how it works for, take your clothes off, then, take the blanket up, etc. And then in 2016, we're going to show you a video of how to open a door. Right, because everybody wants a video when they go to Airbnb in the process. This is Airbnb now. You just want to book a room, a cheap room. Right? That's what people want. That's what they wanted in 2015 in the actual process as well. And often there's this shift in the more progressive organizations towards a simplified environment. We did a lot of work with Cisco over the years, and this is a horrible form with 22 unnecessary questions, right, to actually set up a guest account. So we turned it from an absolute piece of crap to a smaller piece of crap with 11 questions still as CAPTCHA, which is one of the most, what sort of an industry comes up with something like that? Right? Prove you're a human. How could we come up with something like that? So anyway, it's horrible, but it's a bit better. So what's one of the consequences of simplification? Support calls go down from 1,500 a quarter to 700 a quarter in the process. Simplicity has a return on investment, but we must measure the return on investment in the process. Simplicity delivers tremendous organizational value, but only if we measure it. As we said earlier, taking away, the red is taking away, the green is adding in the map environments. So they spend as much time taking away features from the map as they take in adding new features to the map. This is gov.uk, I said, has done tremendously progressive work. This is their content. They've a war on highfalutin content. So they looked at this page and they said, how can we simplify it? That's what they turned it into. If you're asked to register and don't do so, you could be fined £80 in the process. That's all people need to know. This was another waste carrier, 50 pages of content, one tool, one transaction, right? This is what they turned it into. Do you ever deal with building or construction rate? Yes, no. Few logic trees. No more 50 pages of content. No more huge big tools. We can simplify so much stuff, and it delivers so much value in the process. This is the challenge, the balancing act that we have. If we push so much complexity onto the user, They will either stop using us, they will avoid using us, or they will look at us. We say, oh, we're government, we can get away with it. No, it undermines the credibility of government, because people say, what use is government? Amazon does it more easily. Google does it more easily. The credibility and the trust in government actually collapses. So we push complexity on to the user. We're in a very bad place when the user is more powerful. We go the other side where we make it so simple, it creates extraordinary internal complexity in the environment. And what we're looking for, to some degree, is that balance. The balance of where there's enough simplicity and the complexity does not overwhelm us internally. How do we get to this model? We get to this model by a constant iterative design, by designing with people, designing rather than for people, constantly iterating by humility, by agility, and by a focus on simplifying to the point, not beyond the point, but to the point where the maximum value can be achieved. Thank you very much.